Hey, on today's episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Kelly Perdew. He's a West Point grad military intelligence officer who, upon getting out, ended up getting his JD MBA from UCLA and then winning a season of The Apprentice, which is absolutely crazy. His story is very inspirational and great for anybody who's trying to transition and pursue business or entrepreneurship. Currently, he's a venture capitalist who absolutely is crushing it in the game. He has a ton of success stories with his firm, Moonshot Capital. I'm looking forward to you joining us on this episode.
Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military. The premise of the show is really to help transitioning service members. We've had a lot of conversations with people who there's a lot of options out there, but not every military person knows what is available after serving. And so we're trying to highlight the stories of really notable veterans, people that are doing great things, to give a broader range of perspectives, like what is actually possible once leaving the military. Excited to have you on here.
Excellent.
Awesome. You've got such an impressive resume. I'm sure you are asked oftentimes to summarize it as kind of a background, but that seems like maybe an impossible task. So I'd love to maybe zoom in a bit to, as you were getting out of the Army, what were things looking like for you? How did it work out that I know you went and got your JD MBA. Could you just give us a little more insight into that time of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. The decision to leave service came when I got notification that officers in the classes of 89 and 90, the force projection required fewer of us. And after 3 years of active duty, after graduating from West Point, and the U.S. government looking at closing a bunch of bases under Bill Clinton, they said if anybody would like to get out of the military, please submit this. It was a DD form of some sort, but I can't remember what it was. And so I submitted the form. I'd already taken the GMAT and the LSAT and knew that I wanted to pursue business and law. Didn't really know exactly which combination of those it was at the time, but said, okay, let's start a new adventure.
That's awesome. And so did you, as you were going through your graduate school programs, did you have an idea of what the direction was after that? Or how did you come to your trajectory post grad school as well?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in the JD MBA program at UCLA, I did the first year with the law school. And that 1L year is notoriously difficult. And it was hard. It seemed pretty subjective on a lot of the grading. I did fine and got good enough grades that I got a job at a tier 1 law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, in Los Angeles, and got to kind of get a summer internship, figure out what was going on, as a law clerk, looking around, and wasn't really inspired by the 80 to 100 hours a week trying to bill hours. Like, you measured things by how many hours you could bill. I'm like, wait a second, there's only 24 of those in a day, so you're kind of capped, and that's you're capped at a number that you typically can't do very frequently because it's hard to sleep 0 hours every day. And then was introduced to more of the business world during that first year of business school, the second year of the 4-year joint degree program, and met an amazing bunch of people who came from all walks of business. And there was a very strong entrepreneurial program at the Anderson School at UCLA. And that really resonated with me. I had watched my dad operate as an entrepreneur, as a real estate developer. And it just clicked. I really liked the people, the content of the classes, all the entrepreneurial activity. And I could kind of see myself learning a lot more about that and doing that versus what was typically, mental gymnastics for a lot of the law side of the stuff we were doing. And there were some great law classes for sure, but a lot of it didn't seem to have a significant amount of application outside of a law firm on that side. So I was definitely more attracted to the business side. the people that were working in different businesses. And I, in fact, started and worked in my first startup and raised money for it during that part of the program. And then my business classes weren't about some fanciful company, Acme. They're about the company that I was really trying to grow. So having that practical application to the business I was trying to build was really important.
When you were going through the transition, obviously you said you had already taken the LSAT and the GMAT, and you knew you were going to pursue the schooling route. Did you still have a draw to that entrepreneurial side? I mean, obviously you've made a career out of entrepreneurship and investment, but was that something that you had growing up, and while you were in the military, you knew that was going to be the path?
So I did not have a mapped out path while I was in the military on what exactly was going to transpire, how long I was going to stay in. I was the first person from my family to go to the military. Subsequently, first brother, so, kid two, for some reason selected the Naval Academy. I did an exchange semester my junior year from West Point, so he probably heard me talking about the pros and cons. And as a junior at the Naval Academy, I had more privileges than I did as a first or senior at West Point. And Annapolis sure is a nice little city compared to Highland Falls outside of West Point. And there are some other things, but he very smart, pays attention, and he decided he wanted to go to Naval Academy. Next brother, energy trader, didn't do anything military wise. Next brother retired a few years ago, Master Chief from the Navy. And the youngest brother, Boston College, Army ROTC, 100 missions in Iraq, 30 firefights, brought his whole platoon back, and just so 2 Army, 2 Navy in the family. And I had seen my father operate as a real estate developer entrepreneur. And a lot of the studies that I've seen, the curse or the blessing of being an entrepreneur is most closely related to whether or not one of the parents is an entrepreneur, so that they see it in action and kind of get used to understanding. And what I say is thinking about risk differently. A lot of times when I'm speaking to people, somebody asks, hey, I was thinking about starting a company, but got bills to pay and I got some kids, and I'm working for this company, large company X, or the military or whatever it is, right? And I say, well, I think you're mistakenly assuming that you have a secure job. Everybody at Lehman Brothers thought they were doing really great, right? And their history's littered with examples of layoffs, by the thousands. So if you're not at the very top and understand exactly what's going on, it's difficult to take a lot of stock in, oh, I'm always going to have this job and it's actually secure. Differently than if you're in a startup and you are the one responsible for making payroll for everyone. Exactly when the money runs out. There's typically not as many surprises. There's surprises every day, but you at least understand and can see, is that end of the tunnel light or train? Like which one is that light, opening or train? And I feel like at least having some of that, I don't want to call it control, but knowledge and more power to influence your destiny, for me, felt less risky. And so that's what inspired me every time to just keep starting companies, keep trying to build it. And then that's also while I was trying to build my own companies, when I saw the other entrepreneurs in the ecosystem that I could help. I came up kind of biz dev and finance side, operationally, obviously, and all the leadership components that you get from the military. But when I saw entrepreneurs that I thought were great, I was able to put either a little bit I didn't have a lot of money. I was able to put a little money in and maybe give them some time in exchange for equity as an advisor, or, part-time biz dev or whatever it might be. And that's really, as I started seeing that in the Los Angeles ecosystem, how big of an opportunity that existed. And also, all of us here on this podcast share that service DNA, like raising your hand for something bigger than yourself. And I actually look at, entrepreneurship, small businesses as the lifeblood of this country, right? It's really what makes the country great. That spirit, that idea that I can make something and I have this vision and I can make it happen and have the resources and capability and assets and everything else to go out and try to do it. That's super important to have that ecosystem be thriving and successful for our country to be thriving and successful. So, in addition, Craig Cummings, my partner at Moonshots Capital, also a West Point grad, about a third of our assets under management have been invested in teams that have military veterans as part of the founding team. And now, at least for the last year plus, about half of our deals have been in dual use, where there's some sort of critical infrastructure DoD side in addition to a commercial application. So thematically, like still contributing, still part of the process of wanting to bolster the United States of America.
I love that. Kelly, you mentioned, I think it was in the early part of your book, you mentioned the kind of deliberate way you went about mapping the potential colleges that you wanted to go to and how you arrived at West Point and the whole, like, it seemed like a pretty sophisticated process you went through. And I'm curious, while towards a different end, people that are getting out of the military that might have in their DNA that startup or entrepreneur spirit, how would you suggest them mapping out all the possibilities that are out there, maybe finding what most speaks to them? How, I know it's different application of that process, but do you have any advice on how they could go about getting started down that path?
So for whatever reason, OCD, attention to detail, I don't know what it is, but I feel more controlled when I can look at, it's almost impossible for me to talk without a whiteboard. So, I know there's an application in Zoom where you can use a whiteboard, but
so you could have been a colonel then, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, there you go. could have made it that far. I just went back from my 35th, and the colonels look young now, so I was like, oh my gosh, the superintendent is a class younger than I am. So it's just like, wow, time is flying. I've always wanted to be able to visualize and get a handle on the problem that I'm trying to solve for. And, back then, it was graph paper, not a spreadsheet. But it was literally, listing and thinking about, what are the factors about a college that make it important to me. And in the same way you ask it for somebody who's leaving the military, it's like, what is it that I like to do in the military? What am I good at? What do I like to do? What provides a purpose for me? What do other people say that I'm good at? What am I not good at? What's, obviously something where I probably should not go into HR or what, there are different things that you're going to be good at. And a lot of getting out is a very introspective, take an assessment of yourself. And if you can do that analysis and understand it, and interestingly, my co-founder, we published on Leadership Prevails, our blog about leadership. He actually published an article about when you're transitioning from the military, because we get the inbound question a lot from people reaching out. It's like, treat yourself like a startup, right? You need your 30-second elevator pitch, your 2-minute elevator pitch, and your 30-minute full presentation. Pros and cons, where are you attacking? What's your objective? Give me timelines and timeframes for when you want to solve different things. Now, that's easy to say. When you're building a company, it's easy to do, but a lot of people haven't done that for themselves, and they really should. And as part of that process, some things that I think people frequently overlook is there are, innumerable people like me out in your sectors where you might have interest. And I give, like 2 give back calls a week, where honestly, over the years, like I clearly can't remember all those people, but even at, this 35th reunion at West Point, one of my classmates who I did not know at school apparently had reached out to me 7 years ago. And he said that all of my advice I gave him, he went and followed, got a phenomenal job, worked in that sector, and just retired from his second. He spent 7 years building another company. I was like, fantastic.
That's awesome.
Can't remember your name. I'm glad it worked. So, mapping the plan and doing the front end work around what am I interested in? How do I translate all of these things that I'm doing in the military to business speak so that it's understandable? That's a little bit daunting on the front end, but I always try to encourage and bolster the confidence of people exiting the military, because their leadership experiences far outweigh getting exact wording right when you're describing something from a business standpoint. You're going to pick that up very quickly. And there should be humble confidence about the ability to execute on anything you're given, right? And that's going to make you stand out so much more than 90% of a civilian population is trying to accomplish something. And it's becoming more and more apparent, I think, to a lot of, leaders outside of the military who are hiring. So it's becoming better and better and easier to make that transition. But back to your original question. So mapping where you want to go, finding and identifying people that you can reach out to and have, 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute, and make sure you stay on the timeline for whatever you said you were going to do with that person, because they're giving back and helping you. Like, boom, hit it. Be prepared for it. Get the questions answered. You're going to come up with new stuff during that as part of that conversation. Ask, hey, at some point in time in the future, if I have another question, could I email you, just to try to keep that link in? And you're going to find out the stuff that you don't know. You're going to find out that sounds interesting. People are going to give you advice that can help. People are going to be wrong, but you going through that process and doing that front end work usually guides you to at least a tighter aperture on where you're targeting. And then you can do all the normal kind of enterprise selling. How do I get into it? How do I find the right spot? What looks right to me? What's good for me and my family, wherever we're going to be. All of those things will fall through if you do that work to do it. But just going to one recruiting entity and hoping that, whether you're a junior military officer, enlisted, or whatever you are, that somebody's going to be able to find you a job that's going to perfectly fit with what you want is not a good way to do it.
It sounds a lot like the concept of ikigai, if you're familiar with that, like finding the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world will pay you for, what the world needs, all that, finding the intersection there. But I want to highlight one of the things you said about having external input or feedback into that loop, consulting close friends, family, and mentors if you have them, or finding people that could act in that sort of role, because it is hard to be as introspective to find that intersection perfectly. But I think a lot of people can tell you some things that you're not seeing very clearly. It's kind of the Solomon principle, where you can give advice, but it's harder to follow it, harder to see as introspectively as someone from the outside might be able to. I'm really curious, how often, you mentioned twice a week, or often you freely give back to folks. How often do they follow up with you? How often do you hear back like the results of the advice or free time that you gave?
If they're entering my realm, like venture capital and early stage technology and dual use and DoD, it can be frequent, right? We operate pretty extensively and are out in the, whether it's trade shows or meetups or with the hottest companies that exist. Like there's typically some point in time where there can be an additional interaction. What you just mentioned about that Solomon-like guidance. So, when I talk to people who are thinking about the transition and everything that's going on, like I say, as a startup, you try to build a board of directors. You have some advisors. They have expertise in certain categories, and all these things are going on. But I highly recommend that you have also a personal board of directors, and it's people who don't have a investment with you necessarily, so that they can say, hey, you're killing yourself. This is not going to, yes, you did not give up. You showed grit. It's not working. Now you're harming yourself, right? You're underwater. It's better to cut it, go start something else. And then all those people that you lost their money, or whatever, you had to fire them, you can hire them back on there. You can give them friends and family shares in the next gig. But there's a point that someone other than you has to be like, ice bucket on your head, slap in the face, like it's done, it's over, stop. And a lot of people don't spend any time building that personal board of directors that they should, because like entrepreneuring sounds awesome, but it is incredibly difficult. It is a very lonely, unforgiving, treacherous, nasty place. It's not all what you see on the rags on the websites of the $1 billion company happening overnight. Like, you guys are familiar with ID.me, right? Mm-hmm. Online identity verification. So Blake Hall's a military veteran, Vanderbilt Army ROTC, massive, like the most successful hunter killer platoon leader in Iraq, genius, went to Harvard. And I met him when he was raising his very first capital for what was called Troop Swap originally. So you also know that things haven't gone great when you've had three different names for your company, right? It's called pivoting. Um, that was 14 years ago. So there were 7 to 10 years of low crawling through broken glass in this overnight success of
Right.
ID.me that's now at 1.7 billion, serving 130 million plus Americans. So it's a long, hard road, and you need to have people who care about you, notwithstanding the actual company that they might have invested in.
And thankfully, nobody told him to stop low crawling through that glass, because we would have missed out on a great product. Or maybe he just didn't listen.
Yeah. I think a couple of times I encouraged him, give him some advice on, what not to say in front of an investor ever again, how to approach problem. But I've learned so much more from him than I've gained with him, I think. But it's been a phenomenal ride, and it's still going. So
I think that's tremendous advice. I can't imagine many people leaving the military have a personal board of advisors, most of them maybe don't even have someone they consider an actual mentor. So, I mean, do you have a personal board, a team that you treat in that same way? And how would you talk to somebody about building that? I don't want to make this scientific or anything. It's finding good people, but is there a way that you go about it?
I mean, part of those informational interviews that I, suggested make a lot of sense for you. Like, do keep in touch, do update somebody if you followed their advice or it helped, and think about ways to stay in touch. Some people are more open to it than others. Some people's dance card is full and they have zero time to do anything, but every now and then you get a click, kind of like I did with Blake, and there multiple examples along the way. I personally was fortunate to have two mensch advisors, one actually in venture capital. Luis Villalobos was the founder of what was one of the largest angel groups in the country, Tech Coast Angels. He was a founding board member for the Angel Capital Association, and he helped start angel groups in Washington, D.C. and New York. And he just helped people. He was awesome, brilliant, very mathematically inclined. He's in fact he's the reason that I started helping all the other entrepreneurs when I was entrepreneuring. All the Monte Carlo simulations that he'd run for early stage high tech investing showed that in order to get the benefit of that highest performing asset class, you had to be invested in 20 to 25 companies. That's what all the math showed. And what typically happens with angels is they go to a dinner with a buddy who's got a couple people pitching. One of them definitely sounds better than the other one. Their entire data set's two entrepreneurs that have pitched in front of them. So they think the good one's, a smoke show. And they're like, here's my $25,000 check. And they do that 2 or 3 times. And then one of them goes under. And that person, typically significant, goes, it's a college education's gone, even though there's 2 still going. And, but it's, and then they stop. So unless they got really, really lucky, it's difficult unless you do, a large distribution to get the diversification. And he taught me that. And that's why I started doing everything that I did and got so fascinated with it and interested in it. And he just was a board member for one of the companies that I work for that decided to spend some time with me and teach me about the stuff that he was working on. I had another one who was the CEO of Adidas. Adidas. He grew against Nike and had the largest growth in Nike. His name was Steve Wynn, not the one from Vegas, although that would have been an interesting mentor.
No kidding.
And then I had 15 months apprenticeship with Donald Trump after I won season 2. But we don't have to talk about that now. Lots going on with that right now.
That's right.
That's actually a common theme that we've had, is balancing the luck or the impetus for whatever pursuit you're going to follow and the hard work that comes from it. And I'm sure a lot of people see The Apprentice and some of the things that you've done and probably just, oh, it's lucky he got a break and then he went with it. But the hard work and the preparation that you mentioned on the actual effort you put into which school to go to when you were in high school, right? The preparation, that's been a huge value that we're trying to explain to veterans who are getting out. You have to put the effort in. It's not just going to be given to you on a silver platter. what would you see, of course, your own experience, but also the veterans that you've interviewed or that you talk with about, that you might invest with, what are they doing that separates them from others? They're coming across as somebody who can manage their company and make it to the top.
So, our selection criteria it's pretty staggering when you think about it from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So for instance, for Fund 2, we saw 5,900 deals come across and we invested in 16.
Wow.
I don't know what that percentage is, but it's very low, like less than a point, right? Like it's super, super small. So it seems pretty daunting, right? And to stand out in that size of a crowd is pretty hard to do. I wrote a book on applying military leadership principles to business called Take Command, and we've adapted those leadership principles. There's a rubric by which we do an evaluation of the leadership chops of the teams that we're investing in, and there is typically a CEO, but in many instances there's multiples. So it's the decisioning for investing other people's money into somebody is a difficult and interesting one. And I'll come back to your question because I want to say something about just military vets specifically and why that's a big focus of what we do. So, the American public trusts their sons and daughters to be in harm's way with soldiers, right? Like it's a sacred trust that military takes very, very seriously. How could you not, right? It's unbelievably, amount of responsibility. What Craig and I have found is that same level of feeling of responsibility is true for a military veteran who takes someone else's money. It's not a whimsical 20-something kid from an Ivy League school who's, oh, we raised $20 million. Let's try this. It's much more, I really need to be careful with this. I need to be, super, super concerned about how it's being deployed and what's happening. How do I get a return? And that's something that it doesn't mean that, someone not from the military can't have also that same level. We just see it as a kind of built-in additional bar that a military veteran brings with them. So those leadership principles are very important. And then there's an entire set of other variables listed on our website that are important for us when we're investing, the stage we're investing in, the sector, whether or not Craig's and my background and network are going to be able to add significant value and hopefully distinctive value from another investor. And then there are two things that are not on our website. And this is that pattern recognition. Like I told you, the angel that only does 2 or 3 deals has only seen 2 or 3 deals. So that looks good. If we've seen 5,900 for Fund 2, we start to get pattern recognition and see things that stand out to us and appeal to us. So there are 2 things that are not listed on the website that are important, that about midway through Fund 2 started to take effect. So when Craig and I have both taken the pitch from that founding team and seen what they plan to do, where they're from, heard the founding story and see all those things, Craig and I need to, the call's over, we need to look at each other and go, fuck yeah. Like, because I've been with Blake like 14 years, right? Literally, like I had an Android phone at the time, and it used to, like, your most frequently called numbers would be bubbled to the top of the call list, and like Blake was bouncing my wife out of there, right? Like he was at the top. And so and this is for this industry, but I'm sure that has applications in other industries. So we need to be so compelled that, like you're in the shower washing your hair, like, okay, how do I help ID today? What do we need to do? Like that's it's like getting married, part of your family kind of thing, right? So it's super important. And second, this also evolved over time. Like initially, when we were doing angel deals and we were doing syndicate deals, and even some of Fund 1, it was like, what do we like? Like, okay, that sounds interesting. Let's do that. When you start using the other people's money in the fund, you have to describe your thesis and why you're investing in things. And I remember the day that it became embedded. We were about to close terms on a founder that we really liked, that a investor that we trusted and invested with before had sent over to us. The unit economics looked good, and the traction was moving. And it's like, okay, everything looks great. Like we like the founder a lot. Like, and I was just like struggling with a little bit of stuff. And then I thought, okay, if it's completely successful in 5 years or 10 years, are we going to be proud of it? Like will the impact have been like an ID me on the world, right? And there's a horoscope company. And so I don't know how you guys feel about horoscopes, but it doesn't carry the same weight, right, as a red fix that's helping fighter pilots train against, in visual range bad guy. Like it just does. It's not the same level of meaningfulness. So one is fuck yeah, and two, it has to be super meaningful on the trajectory of what it's going to do. So when we get the right type of leadership characteristics that are exhibited in a founder or founding team with all of the normal venture capital, like size of market, defensible moat that they can create. Why are they the team to execute on it? Does our network work in helping them, and all those other ones that everybody can kind of read on the web, on the web and know. And we're fuck yeah, and this is going to be meaningful. Then we write the check.
Lesson in there for any veteran considering raising capital. Talk to Kelly or someone like Kelly who spends their shower thinking about how they're going to add value to your company, because I think that's a rare attribute right there. And I love the fact that you lead with value and are looking for a way to differentiate yourself through value. I mean, that's such an important aspect, I think, in any partnership really, but especially if you're taking capital or going to be working for potentially 14 years, like you've seen with some partnerships.
I have to ask, the point of our podcast is to provide people help with their transition. So if people are within a year of transitioning, or if we're recently transitioned, we feel the military doesn't necessarily do the best job about describing what's out there. The people who are going to resonate with you are people who have just incredible drive and a vision for what they're trying to do. Do you have anything for those people specifically? Like, hey, this guy's maybe the top of his class, or he or she is already performing very well in the military, but they have that draw to do something entrepreneurial. What can they do, especially if they're already at the peak of their, class or what have you? What is your advice to them as they're transitioning out? Do you think that they should pursue the schooling route, or do you think that they should jump right into it and pursue something that they think that they can just really love and create?
That's an interesting question, and it's very personal, meaning there are different types of go get it. Like, I'm going to go get it. Like if you really have an idea, like Blake did, he was just, and people say to this day that we brought into Troop Swap, they're like, I'm not really sure that Craigslist for the military thing is going to be all that big, but this guy, I'm giving this guy money, right? He was that overwhelmingly like, convincing that the leadership is just bleeding out of him. Like, wow, everybody's like, okay, I want to give you money. A lot of people don't know anything about a business side of the world, so they don't have the idea of, hey, I want to solve this problem yet, but they do know they're incredibly qualified to lead, to solve problems, to run special projects, to all the stuff that every first job you had, there's training, but you actually had no idea how to do any of it, right? And you had to go solve and figure it out. So the combination of reaching for something that can provide a return and solve for you, because it's usually not the very first thing, and a stepping stone's important, and brand is important. Like, nobody likes to talk about it, but do you take the brand new startup in the middle of nowhere that's got a 1 in 100 chance of working out that you really like, or do you go to a pretty good brand and get some operating chops, learn business lingo, get finance training, whatever it might be? There are arguments for both, depending on where you are and what the opportunities are and where you want to be, where you think you want to be. So it's not this cut and dry, this is the exact right spot to go to. But typically for what you just described, it's a real big go. Like, going to an entrepreneurial minded business program where you can network with business people like I did and learn about business items, while you can also dip your toe in the water and you're in the local ecosystem. Maybe you can even start writing small angel checks. You're getting to know other entrepreneurs. You're doing team building exercises. You're learning about entrepreneuring. At the same time, you're getting the language down and developing your network. it can be a pretty good spot to jump off from. A lot of people go to a business school and then go to McKinsey or Goldman or like the highest brand, and they almost never come back. Like they're captured, right? Their spending goes up to 10% more than they're making, and they're making a lot. And it's difficult to leave that. You start to get a little softer. You like the warm showers. You like sleeping in a bed. and it, it grows on you, right? And so you also seem to be less willing to take those chances, even though I don't consider it that risk. Once you get married and have kids and get more, responsibilities, it seems to dissuade you from going for it, right? Where you can create exponential wealth or build some giant business. So it can be, again, it's a personal decision based on your life circumstances. And a lot of times on those calls, that's what I'm actually asking about. It's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? How much, do you need to be making in your mind right now for the next 3 to 5 years? It's like, are you willing to bet a bunch on equity? Are you in the right ecosystem for it? Like, if you're not in one of the major city areas where they have really good building teams, it's going to be much more difficult. You can still do it, but it's just a lot more difficult. So that's some of the pulling the questions out, understanding what people want. When I understand that, I can provide a lot better guidance or advice.
You still know how to low crawl through glass. That's what I really want to know. That is the crux of the questions.
So I had been out of the military for whatever, I don't know, 10 years plus when Mark Burnett cast me as the military guy. And so when I won, Today's Military did a commercial where I actually did go low crawl, smoke, shot, did a full blown commercial for the military. I didn't do the rappelling. They had somebody out. They were like too much legality and insurance stuff with it because I hadn't rappelled in so long or whatever. But I was, made up in face paint and going through smoke and barbed wire. So that's the last time I've been low crawling. It wasn't broken glass. They had M&Ms in my trailer and everything else. So it was still pretty nice.
A decade later, don't ask me to do a time stress shoot or anything. I mean, it might be a little bit.
Yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening. No.
Yeah. Kelly, I'm curious. It seems like you've been able to adjust to a lot of different career fields. You've made a lot of pivots yourself throughout life. I was in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and the regimental commander when I entered the unit he had this catchphrase, and it was accelerate the learning curve. And it's something that stuck with me ever since. It's like, how quickly can you get up the learning curve to actually add value to this organization and be a contributing member? What are ways that you've been able to do that, or that you have seen others do that well, to either enter a new field or accelerate the learning curve? And it can be books or content stuff, but maybe also conceptually, like, how do you think about becoming a really contributing member or pivoting and entering a new field?
So it is only, to me, a mindset. Every different field has different access points, potential mentors, learning elements to it. But one of the key qualities that we look for in the people that we invest in is the people who want to keep learning. And I'll go back to Blake Hall, since it might be common to the audience. He didn't know anything about identity 14 years ago, literally nothing, right? He got a DD 214 and, he got everything we got. He didn't understand identity. He now presents and literally can go against anyone in the world and know more granular level detail on how identity works, how the fraud works. The US gave, I don't know, 400 to 500 billion. They're still trying to 400 to 500 billion to, enemy nation states and criminals. And those organizations, their revenue is our fraud lost dollars. And Blake Hall and ID.me are literally systematically shutting it down, doing literally a lot of what he did when he was in Iraq as a hunter killer. He was figuring out how the bad guys were operating and stopping them from doing it. So it's this constant desire to learn, stay curious about what's going on. And if you're actively taking steps to learn, and you know how to learn, if you can't figure out how to learn with all the information technology that we have and all the people you have access to, then we shouldn't be having a conversation. So you can do it. It's whether or not you stay up the extra hour and read about it. Go to that conference and don't kiss the kids goodnight that night. Like whatever it is, you need to be engaged and, curious and trying to win on it. And if you keep doing that, it just keeps you in the game, and it makes you incredibly valuable to whatever organization you're a part of.
We do finish every episode with one specific question, and it's a two-part question. Really, if you have one ask of the audience and then also one give. So we can start with the ask and then provide one give as well.
So, our best source of great deals, like the 16 we invested in and out of Fund 2, is like our founder network. So they're in the trenches. They know who's actually performing. They also happen to know, like, oh, Kelly can get along with this person. This person can put up with Kelly, or what, they can vet it both directions. I would ask the audience that's listening or watching, the best founders that they see or interact with, to please send them our way. Moonshots Capital.
Nice. And then one give. You've already given so much good advice. It can be a piece of advice again. It's one small give for the audience.
So I mentioned earlier that I learned and saw from my mentor, who described the problem that early first-time angels run into, which is stopping too soon and not figuring out that, oh, this part of my asset class is going in this high-risk category. I need to make 20 to 25 investments. So let's say I have $50,000. If I need to get 25 investments out of that, it's 2,000. Your bet size is $2,000, and you need to do 25 of them across time, across sectors, so that you're not, you have that diversification in the asset class. Craig and I run syndicates on great deals that we see that don't fit inside the fund structure. Like, we recently put about $1.5 million into XAI. That's Elon Musk's, generative AI company. Tough to bet against that guy. He also came with Blake and I to Army-Navy game last year. Got to spend about 10 hours with him. Awesome. So we run syndicates periodically, and you can sign up to see the syndicates when they come out. You can sign up, on our website at moodshotscapital.com if you want to see deals so anything that we put out as a syndicate, Craig and I are putting our own money into, and we get some type of allocation. People in the fund, get first allocation, but it does go out to everybody. So there's an opportunity to participate and start to build your portfolio so that you can get to 20 to 25 and take advantage of the asset class.
That's awesome. That's a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kelly, I also was curious before we conclude here. I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably have the issue of focus. There's a lot of opportunity, and it's like, how do we narrow down what really matters? And I imagine that the opportunity that flies by your desk is probably exponentially more than I could even fathom at this point. So how do you focus? How do you narrow down, and not only from an investment perspective, but your personal time perspective? How do you focus on what really matters and prioritize?
So the 11th grade high school list making and prioritization of categories hasn't
more
stopped.
graph paper.
I sometimes use straight line paper every day.
I thought that was going to be a green notebook from the Army.
This one, I don't know. It says airborne on the front.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, cool.
I think I'm pretty sure I got this. I did the what's it called? The Dragon's Den or something like that. Down with General Fenton. He had like the Army's ideas, and the people who built entrepreneurial ideas inside the Army was funded. I can't remember who. CD, General Daniels from 18th, and they ran it down in Tampa. And
okay.
I came in as one of the judges to do the selection process, and they gave me the airborne twist. So it is Army.
That's awesome. Yeah, I thought I recognized the 18th Airborne Corps logo on there. So, well, Kelly, this has been fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us today. And I know that a lot of people will really value hearing from you and hearing your story, because it's incredible. Any last parting thoughts or advice for someone who might be transitioning out of the military or thinking that that's going to be in their imminent future?
Yeah, I'd say humble confidence. You've walked the walk. You've done so much more than anybody in the civilian sector at your age, that you should be confident in that capability and make sure that it comes across. But you remember, humble is really important also, because there's a whole bunch of stuff you don't know. But be very confident in the leadership chops and the experience that you've gained, and just, get in there and kick ass and outperform.
Well, anyone
Nice.
that uses the excuse that they don't know how to translate their military experience or leadership into a civilian resume or civilian interview, you better read Kelly's book, Take Command, because he literally lays it out there for you. So I don't want to hear that anymore. Kelly, thanks for the awesome work that you do and for taking the time to do this. It's really a pleasure.
You bet. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Are you going to Army Navy this year?
I will be at Army Navy.
Nice. I'm taking my wife there for the first time since we've been married for over 10 years, and she's been begging me.
Come on, Jeff.
I know we are going this year, so maybe we'll see you at a tailgate.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Beat Navy.
All right.
Go Army. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures Podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures Podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.